India is the largest motorcycle market in the world. About 13% of Indians own a two-wheeler of some sort. For a rough comparison, about 8% of US households own a motorcycle or scooter. There are almost 170 million motorcycles, scooters, and mopeds on Indian roads. That is enough bikes for over half the US population. And American motorcycle maker Harley-Davidson wants in on the action. The struggling firm bets that spreading into other markets will help it survive declining sales on its home turf in America and pervasive fears over its future. But Harley-Davidson has only a small slice of the Indian market, and sales there declined 21.6% in the 2019 fiscal year and fell about 7% the year before. Total sales in India of motorcycles, excluding scooters and mopeds, were 13.6 million in 2019. Out of that, Harley-Davidson sold only 2,676. That prompts the obvious question, what is going so wrong for Harley in the world's biggest motorcycle market? Two-wheeled transportation has long been a common sight on Indian roads. But the motorcycle market really started to take off in the 1980s when Japanese manufacturer Honda entered the country through a partnership with the Indian company Hero. In terms of volume, the market is still dominated by Japanese brands, such as Honda and Yamaha. Harley-Davidson entered the country about 10 years ago, but it has struggled to ramp up production, build out its dealer and service network, and connect with customers in a crowded environment. India only became the world's largest motorcycle market in 2017, finally surpassing China. But Harley-Davidson just doesn't make bikes Indians can afford. In fact, the machines are too expensive for 95% of motorcycle buyers in India. They cost too much up front, are too expensive to maintain, and get worse gas mileage than some of their competitors. The cheapest Harley-Davidson in India sells for about 578,700 rupees, or just over $8,000. That is about 8 times higher than the median price of a mass-market motorcycle. But Harley-Davidson is a widely known brand, and many Indians consider its motorcycles something to aspire to. And not every buyer is choosing a bike solely based on cost or practical need. There is definitely a subset of consumers who would gladly trade up to a Harley-Davidson if they could afford it, but most of them settle for a cheaper bike made by a competitor. One of them, perhaps the best known, is the India-based brand Royal Enfield, which is the largest seller of heavyweight motorcycles in the world, including in India itself. Though its biggest bikes are still smaller than the typical Harley, the brand has a large fan base with about 3.5 million motorcycles on the road. It has riding groups all over India, which are inspired by Harley-Davidson, and the company conducts regular weekend riding programs. Royal Enfield motorcycles might not quite have the same prestige as a Harley, but they have their own illustrious history and have been long used by the Indian military. They can also be had for much less money. A Royal Enfield Classic 350 midsize bike costs only about $2,600, and the larger, recently launched Interceptor 650 goes for less than $4,300. Those lower prices have been a boon to the company's volumes. Royal Enfield grew about 23% in the fiscal year 2018. It grew another 0.5% in fiscal year 2019, selling about 805,300 units. Other motorcycle manufacturers, such as Germany's BMW, are taking note and making smaller, more affordable bikes tailored to local tastes. Harley-Davidson has begun manufacturing some of its motorcycles outside the US in recent years to take advantage of cheaper labor, lowered shipping costs, and local trade relationships among countries. Besides India, several of the world's largest motorcycle markets are located in Asia. That includes China, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, where Harley-Davidson has a factory. This international push is part of a larger strategy to revitalize its business. The general consensus is that the company needs to do something to secure its future. While the company's global net income grew a slight 1.86% in 2018, it declined almost 25% in 2017, nearly 8% in 2016, and almost 11% in 2015. In the United States, Harley-Davidson has an extremely strong brand and a huge share of the market. The problem is that market is shrinking. At home, it is making a number of investments in new products, such as electric motorcycles. It's also stepping up efforts to attract new young riders and dabbling in concepts such as electric bicycles. And venturing into international markets could provide tremendous opportunity for the company.
I definitely give them credit for trying new things and trying to attract new riders. The question will it be successful? And I think, to me, the jury is definitely still out, and I'm very skeptical that they'll be ultimately successful on that.
Harley-Davidson wants half of its business to come from its international units by 2027, up from a bit more than a third in 2018. That would help it weather a declining market at home, and beefing up its presence in Asia's massive motorcycle markets could help hedge the risks from U.S. trade disputes with the European Union, which many say threaten Harley-Davidson's business. But ramping up in Asia brings a new set of worries. Selling cheaper bikes around the world could do wonders for volume, but it could also drive down the amount of money Harley-Davidson makes on each of its bikes. The brand currently has perhaps the most enviable margins in the business.
So I think the questions will be, what does this do to margins? Because I would argue that you're going to make less money on a smaller bike. And you also have a lot of entrenched competitors in some of these markets who've been operating here for years, if not decades. So it's not like Harley-Davidson is going to walk in and say, hey, we're Harley, give us 10% market share. It's going to be a lot harder than that, clearly. And I think it's going to be a lot more expensive than some people might think.
Harley-Davidson declined to comment to CNBC for this story, but the company has said it plans to release 2 new middleweight motorcycles in 2020. Harley shipped 132,868 motorcycles to customers in the United States in 2018. It only shipped 2,600 motorcycles out of the 21 million two-wheelers sold in India in the same year. So the opportunity to grow its business and stay alive is tremendous, and Harley-Davidson needs a win.